you make me a facilitator?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go drink some water.
Okay.
Trying to make this as socially connected as possible, despite the physical distancing that we're practicing. So if you could please just shout out your organization, like Trace said, and if you could also type out and submit a response about what is a passion project or even a menial task that you have right now that you have taken at home as a form of like practicing physical distancing, but also trying to find your inner peace. So we'll give some time for people to submit their responses, and then we'll highlight a few. And I'll share mine, just kind of get the ball rolling with our facilitators. So a passion project that I took on. So I actually took on the passion project of taking down a doghouse that I had in the back of my house, which was needed to be taken down. So I finally got to that, and I've been postponing it for a while. I'm happy that it's down now. So I'll pass it off to Atreus to share his passion project / menial task.
Right now, my passion project has been taking care of my daughter, who's 8 years old, and she's been keeping me busy. As many of you know, with school being out, it's been a particular challenge making sure that she has what she needs so she can stay engaged.
And if the other facilitators would also like to share, introduce themselves and also share a little bit about their passion project.
Hi, so this is Bud Lavery, and one of my big passion projects right now is getting a lot of work time in my garden.
Bud, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So one of my big passion projects has actually been working in my garden. It's been a warm spring and there's lots of flowers coming up, and I'm getting a lot of outdoor time doing both the gardening and getting a lot of outdoor time taking breaks, hiking along the Eno River.
I think Bud's having some technical difficulties, so I'll read off a few from the chat room. Let's see here. So Lisa Davis with from Charlotte, she said her passion project right now is cleaning out closets. Nice, doing some spring cleaning. Let's see. Tony's passion project right now is cleaning out the garage. Very nice. Mara Chavez, walking my dogs on a regular basis. Cool, cool. Do a few more. Lucy Brown. Oh, I think I missed your response here, Lucy. Let's see who else. Sonia said working on a 1,000 piece jigsaw puzzle. Nice. Who can top that? All right. Well, thank you everyone for entertaining this, and we'll move on to the next part of our conversation.
At this point, I would like to yield to Joellen Spacek from Mentor National to share the national perspective.
Say thanks, Atreus, and to everyone. I love this feedback that you're getting about what people do in painting their kitchen, cleaning their garage, cutting down trees, dancing, listening to music. Way to go, self-care. Like, awesome, awesome to see everything that everybody is doing to take care of themselves during this moment in time. I wanted to give you a little bit of feedback or information, resources. I saw some of the things that people were posting about what they need in terms of staying connected to young people, particularly those, for most of us, if not all of us, the kids that are out of school. So Mentor has put together a few different resources, and I think hopefully you can go to the slides that talk a little bit about the mentoring resources. But we have on our website a place where you can get access and converse with mentoring programs all around the country, some tips about how you can navigate this moment in time, a number of resources. I think it was the previous slide. A number of resources that you can, yep, that one, perfect. A number of resources, updates on policy and advocacy. As most of you know, the small business loans are available as of today, and many nonprofits around the country, in addition to small businesses, private sector small businesses, will be applying for those. We've heard get in early if you are thinking about it. And or contact your bank that you work with already to figure out if you'd be eligible for that. And then we have two different requests we're making of you and mentoring programs around the country, asking people to complete a survey. And again, there's the survey link is on that mentoring.org site. It's a question around what you are facing right now. What are some of your challenges? If we could generate more funding and resources, what would those best help your program achieve? And for you to share back with other mentoring organizations around the country, kind of the ways in which both Mentor North Carolina as your local leader and Mentor nationally and the rest of our affiliates can support you during this time. I was negligent at the beginning saying, I am so impressed and proud of the work that Mentor North Carolina is doing in being a leader at this moment in time. Helping bring people together, trying to also respond to needs. We know that there's a lot of basic needs that mentoring programs are addressing and able to get young people access to. So we are making that argument that mentoring is not only needed, but it's an essential service at this moment in time to make sure that young people have access to some of the basic needs and their families, of course. And lastly, on this mentoring.org site, there's a list of frequently asked questions. Many of your peers and colleagues around the country are feeding us new questions all the time, so we're updating that in real time. And the second exciting piece of resource that's available, which is on the next slide, is oh, actually that talks about the mentor program survey. So thank you for that. But the next one is the virtual mentoring platform. We've partnered with cont'd to offer free of charge to any mentoring organization, a one-to-one mentoring with working with young people 13 and older, a secure, monitored, and managed platform that you can access and utilize so your mentors and mentees can stay in touch in a safe way. Right now, we recognize people are getting very creative, but we also want to make sure that there is attention to the need to make sure these relationships maintain a safety as well throughout the process, or for however long all of us are quarantined. And then the second request we have is if you are interested in using this virtual mentoring platform, if you would fill out that particular link, and I think Atreus and Bud will probably send these slides out after the fact, so you'll have all the links available. But you can express your interest in using this virtual platform. And we are anxious to be able to respond to that. We actually have a call this afternoon with funders from around the country. And if we can document and share with funders the numbers of mentoring programs that need and want this, we're hoping we can secure some additional resources to support this virtual mentoring platform, both in the short term, but potentially over the long haul as well. And the last thing I'll say related to the virtual mentoring platform is that we are also looking at some resources and tools for those younger age kids. There are some really great partners out there that we've been talking to who may have, similar to I-Could-Be, a platform that we could use with the younger age kids. So stay tuned on that. Atreus and Mentor North Carolina will get updates on that as soon as we have more information to share or to provide access to all of you in the mentoring community. So thank you for all that you're doing and for your leadership, for your attention, care, compassion, and nurturing while you're also taking care of yourselves. And thanks for inviting me into this conversation today. And I'll turn it back to Atreus.
Thank you, Joellen. So we will keep moving forward here. So I'd like to share some updates from Mentor North Carolina specifically. For those of you all who are not familiar with the work that we're doing, we are working to increase the number of youth and quality mentoring relationships across the state while also looking to address the systemic barriers that young people face on a daily basis. And so a way to summarize that is we're doing three key things. We're increasing program capacity, we're increasing local engagement, we're providing expertise and raising awareness, but the crux of that work is racial equity. And so looking at the ways in which larger systems create the need for mentoring in the first place. Affiliates do these key things. Later on this call, you'll hear from Bud Lavery, who talks about our technical assistance and training. And so there is access to free resources that can help you to build and develop your mentoring organization. And at this time, we will be looking at TA that's specifically focused on virtual mentoring. So those that are looking to be able to get access to that. In increasing local engagement, of course, we want to make sure that agencies have the money that they need, whether that be human or financial capital. We also want to look at legislation, which one of those pieces I'll be talking about when we get to the next slide. And then looking at how we can provide expertise to raise the importance of mentoring. So recognizing that this is something that more people need to know about and collecting data to make sure that we're identifying any gaps and providing services where those gaps might be needed. When it comes to racial equity, our framework is Critical Mentoring. Critical Mentoring is a book that was written by Dr. Tori Wieston-Surden, who's based in California. And essentially what this does is it looks at how race, ethnicity, class, gender, and sexuality and the mentoring relationships show up. So social context is key. So again, making sure that we're not just looking at helping to fix behaviors of young people, but looking at the larger systems that create the sorts of issues and challenges that young people face on a daily basis. One of the key projects that we're working on this year is our State of Mentoring Listening Tour. Of course, because of our current social context, we are looking to switch this to something that's going to be virtual. But from October of 2019 to June 2020, we are looking to document mentor program information across the state. And the plan is to create a State of Mentoring in North Carolina report that essentially looks at some of the key challenges that mentoring agencies are facing on a daily basis, but also things that can help them to move forward and be successful. We're also elevating and sharing insights on racial equity and youth mentoring, and we're informing programs about the tools and resources that are there that can help them to build higher quality services in their communities. We've completed 3 sessions so far. So in the Triangle, in the Triad in Southwest, which was in Charlotte, approximately 100 mentoring agencies have been connected so far, and the remaining sessions will be virtual. And so we'll be sharing some information about that as we move forward. And at this time, I'd like to pass it to Bud.
Atreus, thank you. I appreciate it. So one of the things that we really envision with Mentor North Carolina is having a network of mentoring organizations across the state where you guys are sharing what's working, what you're struggling with, and really leveraging the wisdom, not just from the national office or the state office, but between organizations. So particularly since we're focusing today on how this pandemic is affecting us, we'd love for you to post in the chat section, how has the pandemic affected your work? I think this is an important way to kind of share across the state what's happening and what you're having to do in terms of adjusting your programs. So as we're looking through, as people are beginning to post in the chat section, I think it's a great place where you can kind of see what everyone else is doing, what they're working with. And so one of the key things I'm beginning to see here is like making that transition from an in-person program to figuring out how to go online. Would also be interested as you're posting about, because we're seeing obviously lots of folks are working about how to go online, if there's any particular issues that you're struggling with in terms of figuring out how to make that adjustment to the online work, or what details that are really important that you are still struggling with trying to figure out how to do that. Oh, there's a great comment right there from Clarissa about struggling to maintain the relationships when there's not a face-to-face contact. Some more comments about that sense of feeling disconnected. Making the adjustments to provide the support virtually. Some groups starting to use Zoom, I see. Comment there about age-based programming. This is fantastic. So these are all the kinds of things that are really important to kind of see, and you can kind of see what your colleagues across the state, what they're doing, which also could be potential ways that you may want to connect with some of those folks. I do want to go back and also reiterate what Joellen was saying before, which is that after this webinar, if you would fill out the survey, because that national survey is going to help us both nationally, but in particular within North Carolina, to kind of see what are the needs of organizations. So I see another comment here that youth are very tech savvy, but how do we make sure that the parents have a voice in terms of the work? And sometimes the mentors are not as tech savvy as some of the students or the youth are. Lots of more comments about making that transition from a direct service to the online platforms. Also some concerns about privacy and hacking of Zoom. These are all really important issues as organizations are trying to I think you guys are all really quickly trying to figure out how to make the transition and what are some of the pros and cons to the virtual platform. So great, I really appreciate that. And you can keep putting those in if you would like to. So our second question is, what are the best practices that have come about from addressing the pandemic in your work? So this is a way where we really want to kind of create that opportunity for you to share with your colleagues what seems to be working, because as each organization is developing solutions and discovering solutions for themselves, we can be this network where we can learn from each other from across the state. So in the chat box, if you would also be willing to put in what's working for you, that'd be fantastic. And as we're waiting for some of those, I'd also like to point out one thing that Joellen had mentioned, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later, is that Mentor back in December actually released a supplement to the elements of effective practice in mentoring. And that e-supplement actually addresses a lot of the issues that programs should think about as you're developing particularly virtual programs and all. And we'll give you a link to that at the end of this, because it's a great resource to think about how to make sure you're covering all the bases and thinking through all the details as you're making that transition to a new program style, at least temporarily. So we're getting some solutions starting to come through. I'm seeing conference calls as being one way that's working. Some concerns still about the privacy issues with using some of the online platforms. It's a great note here. Actually, I'm going to mention something from Maddie Marshall, where she points out that in the absence of internet access, a handwritten note is always really beneficial. So that's one of the issues that I've heard from some organizations talking to me about, is that sometimes their mentees don't have access to internet from home. It's a barrier in terms of moving to this virtual platform. Oh, really nice comment about some of the accidental benefits of the pandemic and reaching out, is that it's actually created some opportunities to connect with guardians or parents in ways that couldn't happen before, didn't necessarily happen before. Another nice suggestion in terms of watching YouTubes or videos, having Zoom conferences for discussions about common aspects like that. These are all great suggestions, and really appreciate that. So I hope that you're taking a look at all these great ideas and the creativity from across the state of what's working and all. What I'd like to do now is we're going to talk about some of the best practices and resources that we've been discovering. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Ray, my colleague, to look at a little bit about what we've been gathering that can help you.
Thank you, Bud. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for sharing in this space. I think that we are really in an opportune time to really think about what is coming up for everyone as they're considering the different obstacles and even mental barriers from doing this kind of work, especially during the pandemic. So I put together a few best practices and resources that I found as I was doing some crowdsourcing from various sources, including Mentor National. And so hopefully, and I think what I saw from everyone's comments and responses, a little overlap. So I think that's good. And I think that in many ways, this list just helps to at least uplift and validate the different things that people have been saying. So I'll start off with number one, being mindful. In terms of being mindful, I think what we're noticing right now is that there's been an increase, or not necessarily an increase, but just this elevation in trauma, right? Especially as it relates to the virus and within our youth. And I think something that is really helpful to keep in mind is avoiding harmful messages, right? I think also understanding the range of emotional reactions that our young people may have as it relates to this newfound trauma with the pandemic. And then I think also just committing to self-care and knowing that it's okay to take a break from the news, from discussions about the virus, and just helping to manage anxiety and responses to the situation. Number two, be intentional about preserving continuity in the relationship. It's really important to acknowledge what is going on and not to seem indifferent about it, and also engaging in a dialogue about the pandemic with your youth. Also understanding and honoring their emotions, your emotions, and just the range of reactions that can come from this topic. Number three, be in it together. Let your mentee know that you are in this together with them, and how to best support each other. And it's really important to keep up to date with what's happening with COVID-19. You can go to the CDC website. It should have usually the latest information there. And also in terms of for folks who are actually managing these youth organizations that have a strong element of mentoring, it's really important to establish what are the guidelines that your organization is going to implement across all the different constituencies that you manage. So your youth, your parents, internal, external stakeholders, just having really strong clarity around what are the guidelines is really important during this time. Number four, be communicative. It's really important to have healthy and supportive relationships, especially during this time. If your mentoring program remains open and or in terms of with in-person meetings being canceled across the board, it's really important to let your mentee or have your mentor let your mentee know that there's going to be a pause, especially with in-person meetings, and that to establish some sort of manual for going about virtual connections, and just having that consensus amongst everyone within the organization. Number five, remain calm and reassuring. I think we all know that children, youth pick up on verbal and nonverbal reactions. So just making sure that you're communicating what's going on, but also remaining calm and assured at the same time. And then number 6, make yourself available. So again, just reiterating on this point of making sure that you're establishing communication lines with your youth, with your staff, to make sure that everyone feels supported during this time. Number 7, monitor television viewing and social media. I think this one is especially important because I think we've seen, many different things with false news, especially as relates to COVID-19. And I think also what we've seen with, people hijacking Zoom conference calls, just being aware of threats that are especially virtual, and seeing how this may affect the perceptions of our youth. So just constantly watching the updates, with COVID-19, just so you can best communicate that to you, and also having these conversations about what may actually be false within the news, within other forms of media. Number 8, maintaining normal routine to the extent possible. I think ultimately it's super beneficial for youth during this time to at least have some elements of stability. I think what we've seen right now is that, especially even if you think about college students where, they went for spring break and then they never returned back to campus. I think you're also seeing that with like just youth across the board where, they had this expectation that they're going to go back to school, but in reality, that may not be the case. And this might actually last through the year. So just, finding some ways to have like integrated stability or integrated, programming that has an element of continuity. I think that would really just help to create some stability for youth. Number 9, be honest and accurate. I think that with the great amount of information that's out there regarding COVID-19, I think that the more that we can read up and just be aware of what is the current data on the pandemic, and communicating that to our youth and not trying to obscure the reality or try to downplay the gravity of the situation, the better. Number 10, keep explanations age appropriate. So going along with being honest and accurate, I think also just being cognizant of the youth that you're serving, just in terms of what are their ages, and what can you actually convey to them regarding COVID-19. And so I listed some points in terms of if it's like early elementary school children, you can be brief, use simple information that should balance COVID-19 facts with appropriate reassurances that their schools and homes are safe, and that adults are there to help them stay healthy, to take care of them if they do get sick. I think if they're upper elementary and early middle school children, we can be more vocal in asking questions about whether they truly are safe and what will happen if COVID-19 comes to their school or community. They may need assistance separately, separating reality from rumor and fantasy as well. And then lastly, with upper middle school and high school students, they're able to discuss the issue in a more in-depth fashion and can be referred directly to appropriate sources of COVID-19 facts. And then lastly, for the next slide, for best practices and resources regarding like actual concrete measures, I put a list there, and this is disaggregated by school site-based programming. So if you have that type of program, then you can potentially send letters as a form of communication, use a 3-way conference call with your mentor, mentee, and coordinator, or just have it with the mentor and the mentee. For community-based programs, just utilizing and leveraging different social media platforms or even just electronic devices. And then lastly, for activity ideas, discussing how the coronavirus is impacting them, planning activities for when you meet in person again, playing a variety of different games, or reading the same book and discussing it, or even just watching the same show, movie. And then lastly, perhaps sending a photo to each other each day, or just finding that way to have that ongoing communication. All this to say, hopefully, this was helpful, and where I think we're hoping to send out this slideshow, or at least some written manual regarding about best practices and resources, so you can always refer to this, and hopefully this is at least somewhat beneficial, especially for your sector and your space. And at this time, I will pass it off to Bud.
So we also want to mention that Mentor North Carolina offers free technical assistance to mentoring organizations. A lot of you know this from our recent listening tours and coming to some of the different parts of the state. So we've made presentations in Charlotte, the Triangle, and the Greensboro regions. And we're actually in the process of setting up a virtual listening session as well. But I do want to, in particular, focus on that word free, because we are very aware that nonprofits and public agencies like school systems that offer monitoring, that cost is an issue. And we can offer the technical assistance in a couple of formats. One format is very specific to your mentoring program or an element of your mentoring program. You might want help with, for instance, how do we recruit more mentors of color? Or how do we need help thinking through a logic model or a theory of change? So you can put in your request actually at the website that's mentioned at the bottom of this slide. And I actually suggest putting it in sooner rather than later if it's something that you're interested in, because you basically get in line quicker. And I'll also mention that there's a couple of steps in the approval process. So it takes a little bit of time. There's a little bit of a delay before we can actually get some of the free technical assistance to you. We also have a more deep process that we call the National Quality Mentoring System, where we really do a deep dive into your organizational practices, your program practices, and your evaluation practices. That's also a really great resource. If you're interested in more information about that, I'm probably the best person to reach out to and talk to about that. But what I also wanted to mention that's very relevant to this particular conversation is that as many of your programs are trying to make at least the temporary switch over from a direct service, a face-to-face program into the kind of virtual space, we can also help you think through the implications of doing that and providing you technical assistance. So before, as I mentioned, if you want to do kind of some do-it-yourself help, I would suggest downloading that supplement to that's the e-mentoring supplement to the EEPM. The nice thing about that supplement is that it frames the issues that you're going to have to think through from kind of those 6 or so major buckets of how it impacts your program. Everything from how do you screen and train and monitor and support and evaluate a program as you switch into the virtual mentoring space. And I say that it also has references to some of the legal implications and the laws. Like a lot of times face-to-face programs aren't necessarily aware of some of the laws, like the COPA laws that actually impact, and you have to think through if you're serving youth that are under age of 13. Make some really good references to other things like your mentees and your mentors may have different experiences or different levels of knowledge and understanding about how to express emotion or kind of communicate, or the potential for miscommunication in some of the virtual platforms. So a lot of times younger people are more used to using emojis or GIFs. Sometimes mentors are very skilled in that and sometimes they're not, but that's also, those are some of the kinds of issues that you can ask for help in terms of thinking through how to make that transition into that virtual space. And how do you make sure that that very important kind of relationship and that sense of connection is still happening as well too. So it's a really good resource. If, like I said, we can provide the technical assistance either for a regular program issue, a very deep dive, and in the context of this particular webinar, that transition into that kind of virtual space and the issues that you want to think about as well too. So a couple of things that you can do with that is that if in the chat side, if you're interested in making sure that we get back to you about the technical assistance, you can just basically write in your information in the chat forum. Or you can just directly go to the website that's listed on here and actually begin the application process. The application itself only takes maybe like 10 minutes to actually set up. So it's not a very difficult application to go through. So if you're interested, like I said, go ahead, you can put some information into the chat. If you're interested in NQMS, that deep dive in particular, you might want to email me. Atreus, I'll turn it to you.
Actually, I'm going to let Joellen talk about some of the recaps from nationals if she'd like to. Joellen, are you still there? Okay, she may not be here anymore. So here's some key actions we can look at. So again, Mentor, they have a national survey that you can complete that shares out just some of the key challenges you may be facing right now. So you can fill that out. At the very top, you'll see the bookmark that has all of the coronavirus resources on the Mentor's national website. And so that is updated constantly. And so I'd say, please go there. If you are interested in potentially signing up for the cont'd.org platform, if you can complete that, you'll see the link there. And as Bud just mentioned, we would love for you to apply for some no-cost technical assistance, and there's a link for that. Next coming up, we have the Collaborative Mentoring webinar series that Mentor hosts. The next is on Thursday, April 16th, 2020, from 1 p.m. to 2:15 Eastern Standard Time. The title is We See You, Mentoring Boys and Young Men of Color Through a Racial Equity Lens. There's a link to register for that. This is going to be a very important conversation, just really looking at the ways that we can move past just talking about research and all the challenges. And of course, there are some bright spots that exist. But much more needs to be done to improve life outcomes for boys and young men of color. And so I invite you to join us for this intimate conversation. You'll see we have Dr. Wes Bellamy, who's the Charlottesville City Councilman. He's also chair of the Public Policy Committee of the 100 Black Men of America. We have Burnell Holland, who's the Deputy Director of the MBK Alliance for the Communities of the Obama Foundation. And then Steve Vassar, CEO of See Further, a consulting firm that works with mentoring agencies. And he's a contributor to the Guide of Mentoring Boys and Young Men of Color. I'm actually going to allow Joellen to talk about some next steps also. Unmute.
Thank you, Atreus. Hey, we're all learning
Joellen, you're on.
technology as we go. Yeah, thank you, Atreus. No problem. I think you summarized it well. Again, we really appreciate your feedback on that survey. Tell us more what you're dealing with. I'm assuming Bud, Atreus, Raimundo are capturing your feedback in the chat box right now. So we'll pass that along to the mentor team. Let us know if you're interested in using that virtual mentoring platform. Any and all feedback on that is really appreciated, and absolutely tap into Mentor North Carolina to receive some free technical assistance through the National Mentoring Resource Center. Utilize all those resources, anything you get access to right now at this moment in time. And we'll rely on Atreus and his team to share with Mentor any additional feedback that you may send along the way over the next several months.
Thank you, Joellen. Well, that is it. We have had a great discussion today. If you would like some additional information or to reach out, there's our contact information. Feel free to send us an email, call us at our office line, or visit our website. Thank you for joining us, and we'll look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thank you, everyone. Be well.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.